All right. So I had a quick interruption, but I'm back. All right. So let's pick up where I did leave off just a second ago. All right. So the study of the customs and rights and the analysis of the semantics of these African tribes have led many of their observers to propose some hypotheses and even draw some conclusions. Dr. Alan H. Godbey reached the following conclusion. These factors have a very specific significance if we consider the presence of Judaism among the American Negroes. Here we go again. Hundreds of thousands of slaves were transported to America from West Africa during the trade, which started some 400 years ago. What traces of Judaism still remained among the Negroes of West Africa at that period? To the extent that they were persecuted, they were more likely than other Negroes to be seized during wars and sold as slaves. It is virtually certain that many part Jewish Negroes were among those sent as slaves. And this continued over here to the right. Let me see. Slaves to America. How many of them would have been able to conserve some Jewish customs is another question. The conclusion put forth by Godbey, which argues for the existence of a more or less recurrent Judaism in West Africa in the same places as those from which the Negroes were taken, is shared by others such as Maurice Delafosse, but most significantly, it has been adopted by a class of educated Black Americans as a key argument to demonstrate that the Jewish religion is the traditional religion of Africans brought in slavery to the American continent. Again, this is Cambridge University Press writing this. They published it in 1985. And they said that the Negroes are Jews. They said that it is the original or the traditional religion of us brought in slavery to the American continent. So again, this keeps linking the Negroes to the line of Shem, which goes back to the Zondervan Bible dictionary. What did they say? The Negroes are not from Ham. They know exactly who we are. But let's continue. Before that, the narratives of travels and discoveries in Northern and Central Africa. This is 1822 to 1823. And this is just a snippet from this book. And said he, no, said I, Christians then? Even so, replied I have heard of you. You are better than Jews, said he. Are Jews white like you? No, replied I, rather more like yourself, very dark. Really, said the sheik, why are they not quite white? They are bad people. After staying a full hour, he took my hand and said, I see you are a sultan. So anyway, it gets into this whole other conversation. But notice that the guy writing this says, no, replied I, rather more like yourself, very dark. This is in 1822 to 1823. Now, one thing I do want to point out about Cambridge University Press, before I continue, is that they do talk about the importance of studying the journals and the importance of studying documents from travelers and how they do their research. And that's exactly what I'm doing with all of this. I'm looking into the journals and travel, to the travel notes and to the newspaper articles and book clippings and all this other stuff. This is exactly what we're doing. What Cambridge University said to do. So as we work our way backwards to this, you see we've made it back to 1822 and 1823. The Cambridge University reference said during the early part of the 1800s, or I'm sorry, the early part of the 19th century, that there was this movement, and it says it supports the claims. And so we keep seeing this claim over and over again that the Jews are linked to the Negroes. The Jews are very dark people. But before this, 1822 to 1823, we have the 1766 Duke of Orleans map. This is a French map. And right here we have where it says Lamlim. According to this, looks like, I can't even pronounce this name right here. Land hereabout was populated by Jews. It says the land hereabout is populated by Jews. This is Nigritia. Now let me show you what this looks like full size. This is Nigritia. This is the Lamlim text right here. The land hereabout is populated by Jews. They don't give an exact location. They say hereabout. This is important. Negritia's here. hereabout is populated by Jews. Why would the cartographer in 1766, who gave this as a present to the Duke of Orleans in France, why would he lie about Jews populating part of Africa if this map was supposed to be a gift? Now, what maps weren't like today, where you could just go to Google Maps and look at a map. Like, cartography was an actual job. You had to know what you were doing. So he gave this map as a gift, and it was supposed to be an accurate map. And he says this area right here, or about, is populated by Jews in Africa. Now, before the 1766 Duke of Orleans map, we have the Emmanuel Bowen map of 1747, where we see the kingdom of Judah, or Wida, which is a Portuguese word, slave coast. It's marked as the slave coast. And we're going to talk about why a Portuguese word appears on an English map. Emmanuel Bowen is English. So we have Judah here. Up about this area up here. Hold on, let me see. You see Tombut. I think that's how you pronounce it, Kingdom of Tombut. And you see over here where it says Jews. Now we see over here, we see Tombut and we see Judah. So it's not far off from where the guy says this is over here populated by Jews. It's possible that a lot of this could have been populated by Jews. But we see here for sure the kingdom of Judah is marked as the slave coast. This is important. If you go back to part 2 and go look at the picture of what the Judeans look like, or the Judah look like, they look like Negroes. Now, if Judah is here and this is the slave coast where they are taking slaves from, and this is West Africa, by the way, and according to Kissinger, the wandering Jews are in West Africa. According to the French map given to the Duke of Orleans, there are Jews over in this area. And over and over again, we see the Jews linked back to Africa and to slavery, according to Cambridge University Press. But before 1747, we have the Homan Ayres map, which is a German map of 1743. And what do we see right here? Judah. So now we're bringing the Germans into this. They believe Judah is here too. This is a larger size of the map. You see Judah here, and you see all these black people on the map right here. This is Africa, or Ethiopia, as they call it. You're going to see the Ethiopian Ocean, which we'll come back to in part 5. We're going to start talking about in part 5. I'll tell you when we get there. Now, before 1743, and the Germans made their map, there are notes on this map. I did not add the other map, but there's actually a map which I'll pull up later, because I'm going to insert it for another study. But there's a map that talks about where you can buy Igbos the cheapest in which parts of Africa. And what did Henry Kissinger say? The Igbos are the wandering Jews. We're going to talk about how they got to the western coast of Africa for the slave trade, because Igbos were being targeted specifically. It wasn't just a grab all Africans that you can. It was a specific targeting of the Igbos, the wandering Jews of West Africa, according to Henry Kissinger, a German-born Jew. Now, before this map was the 1737 Spanish map of Nigritia and, well, Ethiopia. And yeah, you'll see all these words right here. But right here, you see Judah. You see the name Judah again appear on a Spanish map in 1737. This is the larger version of the Spanish map, and it says Africa. We keep seeing Judah pop up. Now, before that, we have the Composite Atlas in Amsterdam, 1720. I thought I actually put a larger version on here, but in the Amsterdam map, you're going to see Judah there. There's a link to it where you can blow it up, and you can get in there and you can see Judah in the 1720s map from Amsterdam. So as you see, we have all these countries that keep saying, hey, Jews are here, Judah's here, the Negroes are here, the wandering Jews are here. They have a copy of the Torah. They speak Hebrew. They have Hebrew traditions. All this stuff is going on in Africa, and these are according to European sources. These are not black sources. These sources don't have what the UA would call our agenda. They love to say we have an agenda to misread into history or to misread into the scriptures. And yet, as we see, people are saying in plain language, like the Hebrews are dark. The Hebrews are the Negroes. The Negroes have scriptures. The Negroes have this. They have these customs. They have these traditions. The Lemba have the DNA. The Lemba passed through Sinna, Yemen, and there are black Jews in Yemen. But before all this, in 1619, we're going to have the transatlantic slave trade. And as you can see, they start all up and down the western coast of Africa. They come over here into this area, and they come around this way into this area, and they start taking slaves. And remember, the Lemba migration came down all up to here. We had Jews reported all, or black Jews reported all in this area already. So the transatlantic slave trade, which many believe started in 1619, starts to move Igbos and other Jews, black Jews, out of Africa and spread them worldwide. This is important because when you look up the Igbo people in the transatlantic slave trade, this is Wikipedia, and you can research outside of Wikipedia anywhere you want to. It talks about the Igbos in the slave trade. It says the Igbo in the indigenous Igbo territory, the Bight of Biafra, also known as the Bight of Bonny, became the principal area in obtaining Igbo slaves. The Bight's major slave trading ports were located in Bonny and Calabar. Many of these Igbo slaves kidnapped. An estimated 14.6% of slaves were taken from the Bight of Biafra. It doesn't say Igbos. It doesn't say that 14.6% of slaves were Igbo. It says 14.6% of the slaves were taken from there. Because as I'll show you later on in another study, there's a map that says Igbos can be bought in different locations of Africa, but 14.6% of the slaves were taken from the Bight of Biafra. Now, if you go down here, it says it is estimated that a total of 1.4 million Igbo people were transported across the Atlantic in the era of the Atlantic slave trade. Most of these ships were British. All right, so if we go back to Cambridge University Press, we'll get back there. If we go back to Cambridge University Press, I should just pulled it forward, but it says hundreds of thousands of slaves were transported to America from West Africa. But when we go check over here, it says 1.4 million were transported. 1.4 million were transported, right? So there's a huge difference in numbers there. However, we know that a large amount of Igbos were translated. And who did Henry Kissinger say the Igbos were? The wandering Jews of West Africa. Who did Cambridge University say brought over Judaism and traditional Jewish stuff? The slaves taken from West Africa. We'll keep going. So Igbo Americans or Americans of Igbo ancestry are residents of the United States who identify as having Igbo ancestry from modern day Nigeria. So first we saw Ghana mentioned. Now we're seeing Nigeria. There are primarily two classes of people of the Igbo ancestry in the United States: those whose ancestors were taken from Igbo land as a result of the transatlantic slave trade before the 20th century, and those who immigrated from the 20th century onward, partly as a result of the Nigerian Civil War. But as we get down here, we'll come down here. It says their presence in the United States was met with mixed feelings by the American plantation owners because of their rebellious attitudes to enslavement. Many of the enslaved Igbo people in the United States were concentrated in Virginia's lower Tidewater region, and at some points in the 18th century, that's the 1700s, they constituted over 30% of the enslaved black population. So in the 1700s, over 30% of the black population were Igbos. Again, and that's in Virginia. 30% of the black population were Igbos. And who did Henry Kissinger say they were? The wandering Jews of West Africa. So Igbos, again, linked to slavery. And the Igbos were also linked to West Africa. According to Cambridge University, the slaves' traditional African religion was Judaism. We talked about Kumbaya. We talked about Gullah being West African dialect. Them calling out to Yah. Now, see, the problem is we have to present so much proof when all the proof is there, but these other people can come and just say, hey, we're Jews. and they accept it because they're Europeans. But when black people come along, no matter how much proof we have, we still need to provide more proof. So, okay, let's keep going. Late 1400s, Jews expelled to Africa. Barbeau states that in the reign of Don John II and about the close of the 15th century, so that's the 1400s now, the late 1400s, large numbers of Jews were expelled from Portugal and taken to the coast of southern Guinea, that's Africa, that the island of St. Thomas or Sao Tome, which is Africa, which is not more than 100 miles off the mainland, was populated by mulattoes descended from the Jewish exiles and Anglo women. Black Jews and white women, mulattoes. It is possible that the Jewish types of character noticed at the Gabon and Leongo, those are in Africa, may have originated from this source. But if so, it is unknown to the present inhabitants of this country, and it would have been somewhat singular if the Roman Catholic missionaries at Leongo had not detected this circumstance instead of regarding them as pure African family of Jews. Who? The Roman Catholic missionaries. These weren't black people that noticed this. Congo and Angola or Dongo people. There have been so many of the Congos and Angolos brought to this country in former years, while still greater numbers have been imported into Brazil of late, that it scarcely seems necessary to give a minute account of them in this place. It is important to remark, however, that these families in Africa cannot be fairly estimated by such specimens of the nations have been brought to America. For the subjects of the slave trade have almost invariably been gathered either from certain degraded clans that are interspersed among the more powerful tribes. Anyway, it gets further into that. But the end of the 15th century, why is that important? That these black Jews were expelled from Portugal and they were taken to southern Guinea, Sao Tome, Gabon, and Leongo. Because at the end of the 15th century, 1492, Christopher Columbus, or Cristoforo Colombo, discovered, use that term very loosely because we know he didn't discover it, America. But look at this. An Italian explorer, Cristoforo Colombo, is of course most famous for his discovery of North America. But a recent historical theory suggests that Columbus was not born in Genoa, Italy, and rather was a Portuguese nobleman who adopted the name when he moved to Spain. The DNA from a skeleton might prove it. He was may have been a Portuguese nobleman. So what were the Portuguese doing toward the end of the 15th century? Deporting Jews over to Africa, sending explorers to find a new world, somewhere to put these Jews. And this is from Forbes, FYI, Forbes.com. So, I mean, if you don't consider Forbes a credible source, that's fine. But it's from Forbes.com that he might have been Portuguese. So this right here I threw in is kind of interesting. A chronology of slavery and abolition and emancipation in the 16th century. So from the 1500s, right? So if Columbus went in 1492, 10 years later, you see them sending a slave over to the New World. And then they sent a small group of slaves in 1504. And then there's a slave rebellion. Wait, I didn't even put the slave rebellion here. So forget the slave rebellion. That's in the 1600s. But they start to transport slaves in small numbers in the early 1500s after Columbus goes on his scouting mission. But before the late 1400s, early 1500s, you have Haaretz. Again, this is a Jewish publication. They published a story about a man named Eldad from the tribe of Dan. This is pretty interesting. The legend of the 10 lost tribes of Israel, exiled from the northern kingdom during the reign of Assyrian king Shalmaneser V, is ancient. According to the narrative, the exiled Israelites were trapped behind a mysterious Sambashan River, which rages with rapids and throws up sand and stones 6 days a week and only stops flowing on the Sabbath, when Jews are not allowed to travel. Interesting story. While it was regarded as merely a myth for many years, appearing in several written and oral versions, something striking occurred in the year 880 CE, or AD for those who prefer the Anno Domini. 880. Now remember, vocab said 1896, right? 880. This is from a Jewish publication, Haaretz. that left a let's see, something striking occurred in the year 880 CE that left an imprint on Jewish consciousness for centuries to come. One day, a small, very dark-skinned Jew named Eldad showed up in the Jewish community of Korian in modern-day Tunisia, which is in Africa, claiming to be descended from the tribe of Dan, one of the 10. He related fascinating accounts of the life and customs of the majority of Jewish people that had disappeared. Of particular interest was the knowledge he claimed to have of early religious law and the archaic Hebrew that he spoke. From this point onward, the existence of the 10 lost tribes was regarded as a fact, as something whose validity could be tested in reality. Where do the lost tribes reside? Perhaps in Central Asia or Equatorial Africa. So again, 880, we can trace back to 880 that a very dark Jew named Eldad showed up in the community. And this is from Haaretz, one of their own Jewish newspaper. A very dark Jew in 880. But before that, we had Tacitus, who lived in 55 AD to 117 AD. What did Tacitus say? A few authorities hold that in the reign of Isis, the surplus population of Egypt was evacuated to neighboring lands under the leadership of Harslom, I can't pronounce that, and Judas. Many assure us that the Jews are descended from those Ethiopians who were driven by fear and hatred to immigrate from their own home country when Cephas was king. So far he's named the Egyptians, right? This is what he's talking about. He's describing who they believed the Israelites or the Jews came from. First he names Egypt. That's a Hamite. He's a descendant of Ham, dark skin. Then he names the Ethiopians or the Cushites, descendants from Ham, dark skin. There are some who say that a motley collection of landless Assyrians occupied a part of Egypt and then built cities of their own, inhabiting the lands of the Hebrews and the nearer parts of Syria. We looked at the Assyrians. They look like Negroes. What did the book from 1910 say? The Elamites appear to have been Negroes and passed that on to the Assyrians. So we keep seeing this over and over and over again. They thought the Jews in Tacitus's time, they thought they could have come from the Egyptians, the Ethiopians, or the Assyrians, all Negroid looking people. The Assyrians were Negroes, but the Ethiopians and the Egyptians were Hamites. But the Ethiopian kings, if we recall, the Ethiopian kings are going to be what? Descendants of the tribe of Judah. That explains why in the Bible, God says, "Are ye not as children of the Ethiopians unto me?" But before that, we had the Solomonic dynasty. I told you we'd come back to the Solomonic dynasty. Before 155 to 117 AD. Now, just to note real quick, Tacitus did live during Paul's time, which corroborates the story in Acts where Paul is mistaken for an Egyptian. Tacitus points out that, yes, we believe that they might be Egyptians or Ethiopians or Assyrians. We didn't know where they came from, but these are all Negroid peoples or Negroid looking people. But the Negroes did not come from Ham, as the Zondervan Bible says. So before that, we have the Solomonic dynasty. So the Solomonic dynasty, use the same picture again, was founded in 900 BC. And they maintained records. And if you go to my website, blackhistoryinthebible.com, and you type in Solomonic Dynasty, I have the Solomonic Dynasty records posted on the site. Because understand that when we are taught our history by people that are not us, they're not going to dig this deep. They're not going to keep digging to show us that, hey, you guys are more than likely the Israelites of the Bible. Because that will require them to admit that their ancestors enslaved the Israelites of the Bible. It would cause them to admit that all the stuff being done to us isn't just stuff, because the Bible says, I will bless them that bless you and curse them that curse you. That's why they give billions of dollars to Israel every year. They give those billions of dollars because they're hoping to bribe God in a way, or receive a blessing from God for supporting Israel, or who they believe is Israel. And yet they've enslaved true Israel. See, here's the thing about the truth. There's consistency in it. I've said that before. So for those of you who have watched the entire study, there's no way you can look at all that evidence and then say, you know what, I still don't have enough proof that what they're saying is true and that black people are really the Israelites. There's more proof out there, 100% guaranteed. It's available in my books, Undeniable and the Black Hebrew Awakening. There's tons of evidence, tons of it. It just hasn't been assembled and presented in an easily digestible way in any form that you've probably been in, like public school or college or seminary, because they have no incentive to give it to you. They have no incentive to teach you your history. Basically, we're paying them to omit our history and lie to us about the history they do accept. So for those of you who have not read my books, Undeniable or The Black Hebrew Awakening, go to Amazon, go to Barnes & Noble, go to your local bookstore, grab those books. Play this video back again if you have to. Go to blackhistoryinthebible.com. You can research for free. And for those of you who still want to support, patreon.com, Dante Fortson. There are also support links in the description, or the link in the description. So subscribe to my YouTube channel. I got some more stuff coming. In part 5, I'm going to talk about how the Hebrews or the Israelites got to Africa in the first place. We're going to leave off with the reference to 900 BC, but we're going to talk about how they got into Africa in the first place to be taken as slaves in the transatlantic slave trade. There's going to be another portion of history you probably have heard, but not to the depth that I'm going to bring it to you. Click the thumbs up button. Click the bell if you want to be notified when I post new material. And if you have any questions, please feel free to send them. Till next time, I'm out.